Let's go ahead and call the August 7th meeting of the Charter Review Committee to order. It's okay, sister. Don't you worry about that. All right, so we'll do the roll first and then the pledge.
I'm here.
Mr. Wembley. Here. Mr. Lewis. Mr. Lewis out. Mr. Coleman. Present. Mr. Powell. Present. Mr. Fouché. Ms. Wilhelmi. Mr. France. Present. Mr. Pearson. Here. Mr. Bryant. Present. Ms. Bakos. Present. And Ms. Robinson.
Present.
Madam Chair, it seems to be all are present with the exception of Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, ma'am. Let us all stand for our Pledge of Allegiance to our flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This morning I have the pleasure of introducing a new Charter Review Committee appointee. Mr. Robert France is going to be taking Ms. Tanya Barnhill Turnley's place. She's gone on to the Augusta Commission, and Mr. France has been duly appointed and sworn in. Mr. France.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. Like Marcia said, I'm Robert J. France. I come to the committee by way of appointment recommended by Ms. Turnley, which is now the commissioner for District 4. I will be District 4's representative on the Charter Review Board Committee. I'm excited to be here, humble and honored that Ms. Turnley actually appointed me to fill that seat, not take her place, because no one takes her place, but fill the seat. I'm here to work with this committee and glad to be here. And just a little bit of my background. I officially retired 2019 from federal government, where I was at PO Soldier, Program Executive Officer for Soldiers at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. My duty and task, my position was Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, for PO Soldier, and I worked the automated department for cybersecurity, and my concentration was risk management framework in that particular portion of analysis. I'm glad to be here. My background is, I'm degreed in computer science, and also I have a degree in organizational management. So I'm excited about what we're going to do on this committee and try to move Augusta, Richmond County forward for the future, not only for our children and our grandchildren. Excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. France, and we're excited to have you. Thank you very much. At this time, if I could please call upon Attorney McLean.
Good morning, Madam Chair and fellow appointees. Can you hear me? Good morning, and thank you, Madam Chair. I want to begin. I know that for those of you that attended the last subcommittee meeting of form of government, I mentioned possibly doing some parliamentary procedures, although this will not be a workshop on parliamentary procedure. When I do give those workshops, I usually begin by stating the purpose of parliamentary procedure. It ensures that meetings run smoothly, efficiently, and fairly. It may not come as a surprise to most, but imposing regulations on a group is necessary to preserve its freedom to act. Parliamentary procedure ensures civility, order, fairness, and efficiency. So today I'm going to talk to you about decorum in meetings. And I've put together a handout, a quick reference guide for you all to carry with you to remind you of decorum in meetings. And Madam Clerk of Commission, can I pass these out? Okay. Okay. I have one. Yes, ma'am. Now, the source of these rules are taken from Robert's Rules of Order, and of course, they are in your rules of procedure. But I just want to remind you of, and these are standard, that members should confine their remarks to the merits of the pending question. Okay? That means you only speak to the motion that is immediately pending. Your remarks must be germane to the motion. Consider making a motion if one is not pending. And that's the only way to bring business before the assembly, okay? Is either through a motion, or if there's a discussion item after the items are discussed and a motion is made. And that's when debate begins, blah, blah, blah. But a motion itself brings its subject to the assembly's attention, or the motion may follow upon the presentation of a report or other communication. When no motion is pending, a member may precede a motion with a few words of explanation. A member may request information or ask the chair to assist her in wording or the appropriate motion. Members should refrain from attacking another member's motives. The item being discussed is the subject of debate, not the member. For example, when one may be tempted to say, oh, he's lying or she's lying, a better remark would be, I believe there is strong evidence that the member is mistaken. A CRC member may not interrogate another CRC member, staff, or citizens. Address all remarks through the chair. And I want to preface this by saying, if you watch the commission meeting, you will see that the members of the commission are always asking the chair's permission before addressing another member of the commission, or they're speaking to the chair. Members cannot address one another directly. For example, after being recognized, and you cannot speak unless the chair recognizes you first, okay? So, Madam Chair, I have a request for information. Then the chair responds. The member will state his or her question. CRC members are to conduct themselves in a professional and respectful manner. Personal remarks are inappropriate. A member may not speak at a meeting until, again, she has or he has been recognized by the chair. Another statement with regard to remarks. I want you to understand that this is an important service that you're providing to the citizens of Augusta, Georgia. Everything you say or do is being recorded. Everything you write is a part of the record. So if you're communicating to one another via email or on social media, that becomes a part of this proceeding. Your social media Facebook pages may even be subject to open records requests. So be mindful of that, because you are acting on behalf of the government. So everything you say here is being recorded, like thousands, hundreds, or maybe just 10 people are watching us right now. So, but it is being recorded. Avoid the use of members' names. If it is possible, it is better to describe a member in some other way, as by saying, Commission District 4 appointee, or the member who last spoke, or the appointed member who last spoke, or Mr. So-and-so, but never by a member's first name. There are other rules of decorum, and I'm not going to get into it, but refrain from speaking adversely on a prior action not pending. A member should not reflect adversely on a prior act of the committee unless a motion to reconsider, rescind, or amend is pending, or unless the member is making or giving notice of one of these motions. And that could mean is simply if you're on Facebook and the committee has done something, don't talk adversely about what has happened. If you don't like it, then make the appropriate motion. You know, there are tools. Robert's Rules of Order gives you tools to handle what's happening here at the committee level. You just have to understand the rules, okay? And who better to ask about parliamentary procedure than the person that appointed you? Maybe they're more versed in parliamentary procedure. In fact, we have a former mayor present, and I would watch him. He had a superior knowledge and grip of parliamentary procedure and how he went about, chairing the commission proceedings. Another one I want to point out is if the presiding officer, meaning the chair, is making a ruling or giving information or otherwise speaking, which is her privilege to do so, any member who is speaking should be seated until the presiding officer is finished. That implies, and it is true, that members should rise to obtain the floor to speak, and if granted, should remain standing when making a motion as well when speaking in debate. Essentially, let the presiding officer, the chair, recognize you before you're speaking. If another member is speaking, don't interrupt that speaker. And also, another thing I want to point out is refrain from disturbing the assembly. During debate, during remarks by the presiding officer, and during voting, no member should be permitted to disturb the assembly by whispering, walking across the floor, or in any other way. The chair should watch that such activity does not disturb the meeting or hamper the transaction of business. In that case, if you all need to discuss something, the chair can simply announce, we're going to stand at ease for a minute if you see members walking around or what have you. Also, no CRC member should disturb another member in any way that may be considered disruptive to the proceedings or that may hamper the transaction of business, okay? So I just wanted to point out those rules of decorum to you. I also put on this form some rules of debate for you to just remind yourself. And this is a form that you can carry with you, read at night before you fall asleep, right before the committee meeting, so that you can have them handy. And hopefully with this information, we will have more efficient meetings, okay? That concludes my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. McLean. Anybody have questions? I would ask that you would take them up with Ms. McLean at the end of the meeting, please. Since I promised Mayor Davis, who has flown all night, that we'd get him up early. Thank you, Ms. McLean. Appreciate the handout. And if it's okay with you, that will get posted as well when we meet with IT this afternoon. At this time, I'd like to call Mayor Hardy Davis, who, a little bit of background on this, aside from being mayor, Mayor Davis was born and raised in Macon, Georgia. And while he was in the state legislature and also while he was in the state Senate, Macon was in the process of consolidating their county and their city. And so he is uniquely qualified to tell us about this. Thank you for making such a big effort to be with us today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the members of the committee, to those that are in roles of leadership to help make sure that this conversation happens in an appropriate format and setting, thank you for that. And certainly to the citizens who are here to be a part of not only listening but learning and understanding. And I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the person who helps make me keep going, and that's Tanya Gibbons. Thank you for getting these notes together for me. I'll begin my comments, and I'll move as expeditiously as Madam Chair you would have me to. I'll take questions if that's appropriate, and then I'll exit and get out of your hair if that's okay. I want to begin this morning with not just saying thank you and having an opportunity to speak this morning for this occasion. But I thought I'd take an approach That's pretty much consistent with how I've been since I left office. I don't listen to meetings, don't watch meetings, don't come down. I stay out of everybody's way, which I think gives me somewhat of an opportunity to speak objectively about not only my experiences, but what I see in terms of government. I'm a student of government, student of history. And so this charter review process is a rare but a vital moment for us in Augusta and the life of our city to not only reaffirm who we are, but how we govern and where we're headed. And so the choices before this body are not just structural, but they're procedural as well. And they're extremely important, especially for a time as critical as this. There are deeply consequential conversations and moments that you're having, and you cannot and must not take this moment lightly because you are on the precipice of resetting Augusta and what she will be in the years ahead. I've thought about this over the last couple of weeks, and I have what I call some of my absolutes. These are what I would begin as non-negotiables, and they're the truths that we wrestle with, and we have to wrestle with them regardless of political persuasion, racial background, or historical memory. And that first absolute is, one, does Augusta want a mayor or not? It's a real simple question, but it's an important question. And that is, does Augusta want a mayor or not? I believe that that's probably the most important question that's before this body, not about personalities or politics. And that is, does Augusta want a mayor or not? I would oftentimes ask myself that in the 8 years that I sat in the chair seat. Does Augusta want a mayor or not? And if the answer is yes, then that office must be empowered, not undermined. A mayor must have the authority, accountability, and responsibility to lead, not merely to preside. The second absolute is, this is about building a system with clear lines of governance. It's really not about power. We oftentimes talk from the perspective of power when we're having this conversation, especially as it relates to Augusta. But it's about clear lines of governance. Governance must be designed with clarity and not with confusion. I know what it is to sit there and experience some level of confusion about what to do, when to do, and how to do. That's a real thing, and it didn't just start with me, but it's existed post-consolidation. And with those clear lines of authority, who decides? Accountability, who answers? And responsibility, who acts? Blurred governance lines, they invite dysfunction, not unity, and oftentimes chaos. Chaos can happen whether you see it or not. It's what happens when you're walking down the hall. It's what happens when somebody needs to answer a question and you can't answer that question because you're not sure who to go to. That's a real issue, and it's something that I believe all of you must and can think about. The third absolute is, this cannot be black versus white. We talk about that, but oftentimes you couch it. I know what it is to be around people who couch the issue of black versus white. And the reality of it is, we're far too long in Augusta's history to still be doing that. You got to call it what it is, the issues of black versus white. And for those of us that have sat here, and I know I've got several former commissioners who are here, at the end of the day, it really boils down to green. How do you move cities? 85% of our nation's GDP happens in cities. Cities are where things happen. Cities are where things get done at, not at federal government. And cities are where government is closest to the people. So I want to challenge you with an opportunity to not only leverage this moment in time, but to get it right. Augusta cannot afford to repeat the tired and toxic script of black versus white for another 30 years. We cannot. Rural versus urban, fear versus progress. I'm proud to stand here today and say, Ms. Bonner, that I'm a South Side boy. It'll always be the case, but I was the mayor for all of Augusta. I was the people's mayor. I still let that ring hold true today. You represent everybody. The least of these, the blacks, the whites, the Asians, the Latinos. And that needs to be how we chart this course as you come to the culmination of this conversation. Whether it be the historical fears rooted in race, culture, resistance, political shifts, all of those things, they brought you to this moment. The charter must reflect the future of Augusta, not the ghosts of its past. I'll say that again, the future of Augusta, and not the ghosts of its past. The fourth absolute is communities are evergreen. As I've sat here, listened, lived, all of the things, I never could understand why people in Augusta couldn't see that communities are evergreen. That means people move in, people move out, people move in, people move out. And for those of us who've been here for any period of time, and I moved in '85, Georgia Power moved us here, but cities are dynamic. People move in, they move out, you get demographic shifts. That's the story of American cities. Not just an Augusta story, but that's the story of American cities. We saw white flight in the 90s. I'll say that again, white flight in the 90s. They moved to Columbia County. Black folks stayed here. This is a real conversation. And it's things that you've got to be able to think about, and think about it holistically, not from a place of fear, but a place of how do we come together and find common ground. I was always telling this story that for those of us who showed up at the commission, I used to drive a Ford truck. Another boy who drove a Dodge Ram. But we always got here in the same place. It's all about the vehicle that you want to ride in. But the goal is to arrive at the same place. And that's what this conversation should be about. How do we arrive at the same place? And so governance must be resilient and not reactionary, designed for growth, not for fear of who's moving in or who's gaining power. If you don't own anything, you don't have any power. End of the day, that's what this conversation is about. My fourth and final absolute is somebody has to be in charge. Somebody's got to be in charge. Not 13 people, not 10 people, not 20 people. Somebody's got to be in charge. Somebody's got to be able to decide with consultation from commissioners. I remember calling the commissioners together in March of 2020. Talked about the enemy we could not see, but the enemy we all were facing. And I asked all of them to stand with me at the Fire Administration Building over on Deans Bridge Road. Several of them showed up. Why? Because we needed to make drastic decisions about our city's present so that there could be a future. Many of you refer to that as COVID, the pandemic. Interestingly enough, we were in the midst of three things happening at one time. Global pandemic, George Floyd, and all of those things. It required someone to be able to make decisions. But if you're worth your salt as a leader, you'll engage other people. And so someone has to be in charge. Leadership demands clarity. That's the process of charter review. How do we establish a level of clarity in this process? A city that cannot name its leader is a city that's unsure of its direction. That always has been the case. And so I don't want to go through the whole historical context. We know how we got here in 1996. I believe Carl Vinson Institute's done a good job on that. And I say that not from what I've seen, but what I know of what they do. I remember having a very similar conversation with them when I was in the legislature. So I won't rehash that. Our time will be better spent about how do we move forward. The mayor's role is critical. That does not negate the role of the commission. I've always referred to it as the legislative body, or as it should be, the legislative body. But you still got to have somebody who's leading the charge. What I've seen in my experiences is that the role of mayor has been diminished significantly over a period of time. We've gone from the old city of having a strong mayor to consolidating and having a mayor with powers, then budget authority being taken away from the mayor. All of these things. I talk about this notion of black versus white and the fears associated with that. Black folks know how to lead. White folks know how to lead. People in general know how to lead when given the appropriate opportunity and the clear lines of communication. And so I want to challenge you again as you're navigating through this conversation not to look for opportunities and ways to further erode and undermine the role of the city's chief executive, but rather clearly define what that role should look like, so that whoever's in that role, whether it be male or female, whether it be black or white, whether it be someone who's Asian, that he or she has the appropriate authorities, that you can hold them accountable, and that everybody knows what their responsibilities are. All too often in Augusta, fear has shaped the decisions that we make. This cannot be that day and that moment. And so the Charter Review Committee must consider these things. Columbus, Muskogee, Athens, Clarke, Macon being the most recent. They started that process in 2012. They culminated it in 2014 with their first government having taken shape. I watched that. Very dear friends with Alan Peake, who was the House leader at the time, and I say House leader from Macon. He and I were a part of the class of 2007. But also in the Senate, because I moved to the Senate just 3 short years later, was Robert Brown, who was the minority leader at the time. I watched that, and it was a lot of that, a lot of that. Alan was on the rise. Senator Brown, the late Senator Brown, he was already established. And I watched this fight, and this fight, much of it was rooted in race. Much of it was rooted in who was going to be in charge. And I watched people who were friends retreat to their corners and then have to come back together to decide what's best for the city that we love and that we care about. I was born there. I lived there until I moved to Augusta. I didn't get a chance to see what Augusta was like before when Augusta consolidated, but I saw firsthand. And so as we think about this conversation, what I call the 4 major cities, again, I just listed them. Augusta's included with that. But upon consolidation, Macon-Bibb became the 4th largest city in the state of Georgia. There's some power that came with that. And when I say power, economic power that came with that. It went from being, Savannah's little sister to saying, no, we're going to be the biggest. I always think about communities from a threat perspective. If Savannah Chatham were to consolidate, Augusta would be out of the conversation of being number 2 or number 3. Correct. You don't want that to happen. You want to create an opportunity to create a city that has lines of authority, leadership, that we can still tell people in Columbus, you're not the 2nd largest city in the state of Georgia. And you might not think much about that, but pecking order matters. Not only does it matter, it matters from here to the Gold Dome to the White House. Lived it, we've seen it, and I'll share a few highlights. When we think about the role and the authority of the mayor, in Columbus, the mayor is the chief executive. There's a strong city manager as well. And they're empowered to lead with the full weight of administrative and policy authority. In our context, I can only talk about my experiences, and I love being the mayor. Again, 8 years. The highs and the lows, I would ask or be asked many times, do you like the job? And I would say 98% of the time. It's always that 2% where something just really crazy happens and you're like, man, I can't believe we even having this conversation. And Macon-Bibb, the consolidation was designed to give the mayor clear executive oversight, reducing fragmentation and increasing accountability. In Athens, Clarke County, there's a commission manager structure, but the lines of governance are still generally clear. But Augusta, on the other hand, who we watched Columbus because they were first, Augusta has slowly eroded the mayor's role. I had an opportunity to meet the late Mayor Ed McIntyre on multiple occasions. He's a phenomenal man, just a phenomenal man. I knew Charles Devaney well. I knew those who had been a part of the old city. I just didn't get a chance to live in it. But I understood what being a strong mayor was supposed to be. saw how Augusta consolidated and over time began the role of the mayor. There's a moment in time where we can correct those wrongs. That doesn't dilute anything away from the commission. The commission still can do what it does. For some strange reason, as this conversation evolves, there's a perception that if you empower the mayor to be the real mayor, you take away the power of the commission. It's not true. The lack of understanding about executive and legislative office. And so I'll share these final closing thoughts. Governance must be functional and not symbolic. Has to be functional and not symbolic. Your latest appointee to this August body, Mr. France, I do not know him. But as someone who was providing oversight of POE, what I do know is there are clear lines of responsibility and accountability. That has to happen in this conversation. City administrator is not the chief executive. Is not. Current structure that we have places more authority in an unelected official than the people, 208,000, my last count, who say, "Well, I thought my mayor was responsible." Then the mayor says, not so. I'm reminded of my very good friend, the dean of the commission, as I still refer to him, Marion Williams, who would always tell me, "Hardy, you're gonna get blamed for it if it's good. You get credit for it if it's right." But the system's not designed that way. Structure's not set up that way. But I was so happy that he educated me and told me just take the good with the bad, the sweet with the sour. Just roll with it, baby. And so we have to be at a place of where clear lines of communication, clear lines of authority and governance, functional, not symbolic. And the charter must be built for the future. 10 to 20 years, Augusta will look different economically, demographically, but also culturally. Will our charter be agile enough to serve that future? That's the question. Will it be agile enough to serve that future? Or will it be frozen in the racial politics of the 90s? A city that welcomes competent leadership, regardless of race, a city that values clarity over chaos. If this committee leaves with a charter that protects political factions, but fails to protect the people's voice, you will have missed your moment. You will have failed. And I will tell you, privately and publicly, you have failed. This is not just about rules. It's about values. What kind of city are we trying to build? I came back to Augusta after leaving the legislature with a single thought in mind: 32,000 students in our school system. And many of them will not have the opportunity that my son, Benjamin Joshua Davis, will have. And I said, if we're fortunate enough to be in this role, can we create a city of opportunity that those who were born here can live here, can serve here, and can lead here? That's still a work in progress. Still a work in progress. And now you've been tasked with the great assignment to help further that. With that, I end my comments.
2 pages full of notes. Thank you very much. May I call upon the gentlewoman from the District 1? Birthday girl, by the way, folks.
Thank you. I have 3 questions, and I'll be quick so you can get out of here. On clear lines of governance, this is something, of course, that I think the current government struggles with, and a lot of folks have had questions about. What are your comments as far as the mayor voting on the commission versus veto?
The current structure, because of the vote of the people, provided the mayor with an opportunity to vote. So that currently exists. If it were me, Sylvia Cooper used to say that I had a pocket veto. I don't know what that was, but that's what she said. I had a pocket veto. The former Augusta Chronicle, they even wrote about it and put a cartoon in there. What I would submit to you is that if there's an executive branch of government and you provide the commission with all of the tools and authority that they need, that the veto is probably more important than the vote.
Thank you for that. And I'm glad you brought up the commission because my next two questions are related to that as well. I'm of the mind that to hold people accountable for the roles you have given them, you have to give them the tools to be successful. Do you think the commission has the tools they need to be successful in their roles? And if they don't, what tools do you think they need?
As it were, the commission was formed in this current charter and the iterations that have evolved with changes both at the legislative level and the local level. As the charter, I'm sure, has been told by this juncture in the conversation, you can make changes with a supermajority of 8 votes. You can do that. And so that authority exists. From a commission perspective, it's really not about a lack of tools, it's a lack of knowing how to wield that tool set and being able to wield that tool set in a way that is focused around economic growth and development, not day-to-day operational aspects of it.
Thank you for that. And my last question, and I'll concede after this. What are your comments as far as commission districts with super districts versus 10 single-member districts?
I say let the people decide. Let the people decide. One of the things that I am a staunch advocate and supporter of is representative democracy. You give people an opportunity to serve. Give people an opportunity to lead. And in giving people that opportunity, whomever he or she may be, their success or failure is rooted in their ability to get the job done. But oftentimes, again, from my vantage point, it's knowing what the job is. It's hard to be responsible for something that I don't know what my job is. And my job is not to be elected. There's a difference.
Any other questions? Mayor Davis, are you going to be available for the Form of Government Committee at 2:30?
I can get a nap.
Yeah, absolutely, with haste. Thank you very much for all your comments. Very instructional. We're up to 3 pages, so that's
Thank you.
excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Excuse me, Madam Clerk, can I pass this to Lena? An addendum to our agenda before we proceed. If you have a moment, please review these, and then we'll entertain a motion. This is dealing with Thursday, the 24th of July. If there are no objections, can we entertain a motion to approve in a second?
A motion, we approve the minutes as written.
Okay, so Sheffy moved, Mr. Powell, excuse me. Ms. Robinson approved, motioned, and Mr. Powell seconded. Let's cast our votes.
Ms. Wilhelmie?
Yes?
Mr. France? Yes. Mr. Pearson? Yes. Mr. Bryant? Yes. Okay. That motion carries. It's unanimous.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, and thank you, fellow members. At this time, could I please call the Carl Vinson Group?
Good morning, everyone. I apologize. It's very nice to see you. And again, I want to thank you for your commitment to this process. It's very important work, and you're doing a great job. So thank you so much. The first thing that I wanted to tell you was we did receive the raw data from the survey. We are currently, it's currently being analyzed and will be discussed more at the next meeting. So that will be on the 21st. So I just wanted to let you know so that you're aware of when we're going to be speaking about all the information that we gathered. Second, I wanted to let you know that I think Macy provided you with a packet this morning. I thought it would be good for you to have the powers that are listed in the charter for the mayor. It's also listed in the ordinances. For the mayor, the commission, and what the administrator's powers are. So you will find that in your packet. Another thing you will find in your packet are 3 just general provisions that we will discuss in a minute. And was there? Oh, and there is a, you want to just tell us that?
So you were given the table of some themes like the ones that we had at the form of government subcommittee. So we are going to be talking about that more at the finance subcommittee meeting. But you're welcome to look at the themes as we've presented to them to you now, and then we'll provide the actual article summaries, and as well, if you wanted access to the articles too, just go through Ms. Wilhelmie, and she can come through us, and we can give those to y'all.
May I request that after today's meetings that we get all of those studies with the abstracts and the links so they can be posted on the CRC website?
Yeah, so we'll just have to send all the information about the articles. The only thing, are we able to share like the actual art, like, because they're like PDFs?
We'll find a way.
Yeah, so we're gonna figure out, how to get the articles to everybody, but there's summaries of each of the articles as well as the citations for each of the articles. We've got that in documents, and we've got them separated by themes. And then the tables that you were given are just kind of those main themes and who's talking about those, but we have it more broken down too.
Yes, if you can write that down. Yes, we will find a way with our IT geniuses how to do that.
Thank you very much.
I
We
am
have to
not-
work with our IT geniuses too.
Yeah, I'm not one of them though, so I do apologize. And then also, we had a longer list before, but we kind of had to shorten these general provisions for you because things are done a little differently in Augusta, and it would have just confused too many things. So I believe, do you have the list for me? I remember what it was. You have the list in front of you in the packet. So if you could just take a look at those just over the next week, it'll probably take you 5 minutes, and then we will vote on it next week. And those will just be placed in the section that they're from as is if you vote on it. Now, some things, for instance, if you put in an ethics board, maybe subsection A would be a general statement, but then you have a lot more specificity under it. And that's why I did not include things such as that. But there will be more general statements. It's just that the other issues, like I said, need to be go into a little more detail. So that's why we didn't include them. So I'm sure you're happy to hear about that one, Sheffy. And then I just wanted to let you know that who we have here today from the Institute, this is John Halsey. He provides financial management training for state and local government officials and personnel. He is a certified public finance officer and a certified government financial manager. Prior to joining the Institute in 2012, he served as a finance director in local government. So he is very well aware of the processes and everything that goes on in local government. He just doesn't speak it, he's done it, so. He has over 17 years of local government financial management experience in such areas as accounting, budget, debt management, financial reporting, and project management. He is the past president of the Georgia Government Finance Officers Association, an active member of the Georgia Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada, where he also serves as an advisor to GFOA, Committee on Accounting, Auditing, and Financial Reporting. And he's a member of the Association of Government Accountants. He has his master's in public administrations from the University of North Georgia and his BBA in major accounting also from the University of North Carolina. So I know you're very eager to hear about the audit process. He is very well versed, and he is going to give you a presentation on it. And if you have any further questions for me, feel free to approach me after the committee. Is there one now? Sure, I can entertain if you have a question.
Madam from District 1.
On the surveys, do we have a final count?
Right, is that a
I've
final
heard
count? Yeah.
1532, is that correct?
It is, yes. 1534 was the total. Now, they didn't answer all the questions, but we did get 1,534 surveys.
109 of which were taken in writing that we tabulated and loaded in.
Thank you.
But a lot of the questions, like some of them may have just answered question one and not the rest. So, but in the raw data, it will have how many people, I believe, answered. It has how many people answered each question. So there's still a good number who answered each question.
When we tabulated them to be excruciatingly correct and fair, those that didn't answer questions like, did you live in Richmond County, we stopped. We have all the copies, so it may be wise for us to include those and send those back to Athens with you.
Sure.
So they get played in. Okay, thank you. Ms. Backus.
So my question is, the reason why we didn't continue with the paper surveys if they didn't answer all the questions is because SurveyMonkey required you to. So I don't understand how y'all got surveys that don't have all of them answered, and SurveyMonkey wouldn't let you submit it unless you did answer them all.
That's a technical question beyond my scope, and it's apparently beyond theirs as well. So we will have to ask.
Okay.
We can. And this might be, I'm not sure. I just saw something that said answered, how many skipped it. So apparently there were some that were skipped.
Yeah, so the first question on the first page is, are you a Richmond County resident?
Right.
If you don't say yes, you don't get to go to the second page with the rest of the questions.
That's probably why. That right there. Right. So that she's saying on the first question, it doesn't let you go to the second question. And I think that's exactly what it did. If it didn't let them go to the second question, they still counted that as, this many people skipped it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
But we did have, over 1,000 usually answering the questions. I believe, yeah. So. Entertain any other questions?
Nope, I think
Okay.
that is it.
Well, with that, I'm going to hand you over to Mr. Holsey in his very capable hands to talk about all things audit.
Gayla, I know I skipped that thing, but we'll return as soon as his presentation's over. Thank you.
So thank you, Lori. Madam Chair, members of the committee, it is an honor and a privilege to be here with you all today to talk about audit requirements. It's been a long time since I've been in the city of Augusta. I can remember coming many years ago to a GASBO conference. So that's the Georgia Association of School Board Officials, and becoming very fond of the Sacred Heart Cathedral. And so as we came into the city this morning, I was commenting about how beautiful that cathedral is, and it warmed my heart so that I went there, I bought a book, and then I came back with some friends and went to a concert performance there with orchestra and organ. And I think it was the Fauré Requiem that was being performed. And so it was such, so it brought back a lot of fond memories, right? So usually, yes, Lori is correct. I do teach financial management training at the Carl Vinson Institute of Government. And so typically I am in the classroom teaching students about debits and credits and best practices in financial management and helping them to understand more about how governments put their financial statements together so that they are in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles as prescribed by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. And so today it is refreshing to be here with you all, and it's been many years since I've been in a chamber like this. I used to do this all the time when I would have to recommend tax levies and present budgets to the county commission. So it takes me back in time, but I'm excited to be here with you today. I very much appreciate the opportunity to share with you about audit requirements in Georgia as you're developing your new charter. So one of the things that I always like to do is I always like to really talk about the cycle of financial management. So I think that's very important to give context. And so everything starts, as you all well know, with the budget. And when I used to do this, I would have to say the budget, right? Because I was in front of what I would feel like sometimes might be the firing squad because there's winners and losers in every budget process. And so the Madam Chair, she would say, John, what did you say? And I said, oh, I'm sorry, the budget. And she said, oh, but that would put everyone at ease. But the budget is so critically important. And so it really sets forth the service delivery and what the priorities are of the government. Georgia law has a lot to say about how we adopt budgets. We have to have balanced budgets for your general fund here, for your special revenue funds, your debt service funds. There's project length budgets that you would adopt for your enterprise funds or those business type activities of the government. And then we also have to ensure that the budget is balanced, and the best way to balance that budget would be through recurring revenue. Although sometimes you may want to draw down some of your rainy day reserve, or you may want to assign some of the fund balance to balance the budget. So that's definitely a policy decision. But we do have to adopt these budgets. We have to do that in a public forum. And then we also have to make sure that we adopt them at the legal level of control, which is the department level, and that's written into Georgia law. And so I know you all would have well-developed budget policies here to ensure that you're in compliance. Then we get into revenues and taxation, which is so very important, right? So we fund government services with property taxes and a variety of other revenue sources, but the mainstay is the property tax. And so Georgia law has a lot to say about how we go about levying taxes. And then purchasing is equally important in the sense that you want to give everyone an equal opportunity to compete for the requirements of the government. So you would have policies that ensure that. Now, the accounting, that's something that's very near and dear to my heart, right? And so all of this activity, sure as we're all here today in the chambers talking about all of these important things, there are transactions that are being recorded here, right? So people are expending funds through the budget to, for service delivery. So there's salaries, there's benefits, there's purchase, there's contracted services. I'm sure you all have outstanding debt obligations. So there's debt that needs to be serviced, so on and so forth. And so the accounting is really important because someone is recording in all the ledgers here, all of that activity that then needs to be rolled into the form of externally produced financial statements for stakeholders, right? And so stakeholders are really important. And so your citizens, whom you all are ultimately accountable to, but then maybe to investors, creditors. Perhaps the city has sold bonds, and so there's bonds that are outstanding, and so investors want to know about the financial condition of Augusta, Richmond County, right? So all of that is very important. So those ledgers that retain all that information need to be wrapped up into nice audited financial statements, right? And so the financial statements are the responsibility of management. They represent management's assertions. And then the auditors are retained to provide an opinion. So can we really rely on that, right? And so that audit is required in Georgia. And I'm going to talk about the requirements for that, but you all definitely meet the requirements for an external audit. But that audit opinion is what lets me know that I can rely on that information that is contained in those financial statements. So I always like to say everything starts with the budget, but it ends with the audit. And so that audit report probably comes to you many months after your fiscal year ends. It is a complicated, involved process. and there's much that has to be done to be able to issue the audited external financial statements. But today I'm going to talk specifically about audit requirements, but I thought this visual may be really helpful in the sense that it looks at the whole process of an audit, right? So while we have audit requirements, it's also equally important that we give a lot of thought to who it is we retain to perform the audit of the externally issued financial statements. And then Georgia law has a lot to say about that in terms of the standards that are required to be used. So that's a process that you would go through, and it's something that you want to really think about in terms of an RFP, right? When you're selecting that person to do your audit or that firm to do your audit. And then we get into audit execution. So once a firm has been selected, then there's an engagement letter that would follow, right? There's a management representation letter. And then we undergo and proceed with the audit, field work, so on and so forth. Then eventually we get to a point where we get the report, right? And so we have report issuance, but then the report goes to many different places, right? So it has to be returned to the Georgia Department of Audits and Accounts. And then if you had a single audit, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, but then you would need to upload that to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse as an example. And then that information gets also returned to us at the Carl Vinson Institute of Government, where you could access any of that information on georgiadata.org through the tax and expenditure database. And then if there are any deficiencies in internal control encountered in the course of the audit, then those get reported as findings, right? So you could have significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. And so then Georgia law requires us to prepare a corrective action plan that has to be submitted to the state auditor. And then system improvements, right? Because we want to get better, right, at what it is that we're doing. And so we're always looking for opportunities to improve. And so those findings would show us where we have deficiencies or breakdown in internal control, and would provide opportunities for strengthening that control environment. And then there's a lot of communication that is going on, right? So ultimately we're accountable to the citizens, so we're transmitting this report to the citizens, but then also to the governing authority, right? So there's a lot of internal communication, but also external communication that occurs in the process. So you might be thinking like, well, what is an audit, right? So I think in layman's terms, an audit is a process. It is a process that's made up of a series of steps to produce a product. And that product really is your external financial statements. And so, like I said, you know, management signs a representation letter. So these are management's assertions. Do these transactions, are they actually the transactions of the government that is under audit, right? Did they actually occur, right? So there's many assertions that are made in terms of the financial statements. And so the auditor is looking at those assertions, but they're gaining a comprehensive understanding through like internal control questionnaires to understand and document what the processes are in Augusta, and then they are going to audit, right? So internal control is so critically important because good internal controls around financial reporting, if the auditor gains an understanding of your internal control, and then as they start performing their test, they see that they can rely on those, then that's good, right? But if they start encountering a lot of deficiencies, then they may have to do more substantive testing, right? And what I always like to share with my students is an audit is not a test of every transaction, right? It's a test of a sample of the transactions. And so an audit is mostly based, I would say, on persuasive evidence and not conclusive evidence. And so in layman's terms, it is just a process that entails a series of steps, right? But that results in those external financial statements. And so just as auditors have standards that they follow, we as finance professionals that work inside of the local government and are preparing these financial statements, we have rules that we follow to prepare those financial statements, and those are those generally accepted accounting principles. So that's what I love about governmental GAAP, is that if I pick up a set of financials for, you know, Augusta, Richmond, but also Athens, Clarke County, they're going to look a lot alike because we're all following the same rules. Does that make sense? And so the auditors then are looking to see, did the government correctly and consistently apply GAAP when they prepared those financial statements. So do they follow those rules? And so you might be wondering, well, John, what types of audits and attestation engagements are there? And so there's financial statement audit, and so you undergo that each and every year. And so the purpose of that is to assure users of the statements that they are reasonably free of material misstatements. So that would be the objective, right? And I said there's these stakeholders. So like, you may have capital improvement plans, and as a part of one of these capital improvement plans, there may be a project that is going to be funded, let's say, with general obligation bonds. And so investors want to be able to make informed decisions. Do they want to buy the bonds of Augusta, Richmond County, right? And so they would need this information. They need that independent verification. They want that assurance that those financial statements are free of material misstatements, and they want to know about the financial condition, right? So, and then they want to know about your credit rating, because it signals your ability and willingness to make them timely payments of principal and interest. So this information is critical, right? So that is the goal of a financial statement audit. And then you may have attestation engagements, right? So this is something other than an audit per se, may perhaps be agreed upon procedures. So maybe you want to look at compliance over like P cards, or maybe it's an automated timekeeping system where there's, like time card edits and things of that nature. So it's where you agree upon the procedures that are to be performed, and then the auditors will look, and then they will report any inconsistencies that they find in the course of their work. Also, when you're issuing a bond, there's oftentimes agreed upon procedures because we're requiring stub period statements in the offering documents. And so there's a certain amount of procedures that need to be performed around that financial information that is included in those offering documents. And then I would say, too, there are performance audits. And we see a lot of this, right? At the state level, with the Georgia Department of Audits and Accounts, they have a performance audit division, and oftentimes the legislature is wanting them to look into certain areas. And so this is where you're looking at a particular program, you're looking maybe at a department, but you're looking at effectiveness and efficiency in programs, right? So you could also engage an auditor to perform a performance audit. So then, who really performs these audits? So definitely for your the external audit of your financial statements. So this would be an independent certified public accountant, right, that you would engage to perform the audit of your financial statements. So we most commonly encounter them in the course or in connection with an annual audit of a government's financial statements. However, that's not to say that from time to time you might engage them to perform non-audit services. It's just that when you look at that first bullet point where we said we have to be independent in fact and appearance, it would be a problem for your auditor that is auditing your external financial statements to also assist you with your internal controls, right? So they need to be independent in fact and appearance. Now you might engage another audit firm if you felt like you needed them to help you with your internal controls, or maybe perhaps we were having difficulties getting the financial statements produced, and so we might call in one audit firm and engage them to help us get the financial statements ready to audit, but then engage a different auditor to audit and opine on those statements. So they do have to be independent in fact and appearance. And then internal auditors. There are some governments in the metro area that have internal audit departments and functions. And so these would be employees of the government. They typically, for obvious reasons and for independence, and the work that they are doing, typically would report to an audit committee that is an appointed committee, and then administratively like to management for budget and personnel reasons and things of that nature. But these employees that are internal auditors generally have the authority to conduct financial, compliance, operational, performance, and information system audits for all departments, offices, activities, and programs under control of the government. So GFOA, and I'll mention this later, but GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada, would say as a best practice, a government should really look at the feasibility of establishing an internal audit function. And I'll talk more about that later. So who must really have a financial statement audit? So this is the criteria in the official code of Georgia annotated. And so definitely you meet this criteria. There is not a county in Georgia that does not meet this criteria. Now, we may have some cities that don't meet this criteria, so then they could have, agreed upon procedures that are performed rather than undergoing an extensive, in-depth financial statement audit. But for you all, you are required under Georgia law to have this, so this definitely needs to be a part of your charter, right? The other thing that's interesting is that, in Georgia, Georgia law requires governments to have their audits conducted in accordance with the generally accepted government auditing standards. So these are the Yellow Book standards, and so that is a requirement. So these standards build upon what we call the generally accepted auditing standards, and so they incorporate those standards, but then have additional guidance that needs to be followed. And the important thing is that just because someone's an independent certified public accountant might not necessarily mean that they are qualified to conduct the audit, because they do need training in the Yellow Book, right? There's peer review requirements, there's continuing professional education requirements, and that a certain amount of that continuing professional education needs to be on the government audit environment. So it's important when you're looking at appointing an auditor and engaging an auditor that we ensure that the person is Yellow Book qualified, right? And then this becomes even more important when I talk about the single audit, right? And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So the Yellow Book audit is very important, right? And so the key aspects of a financial statement audit, so we're really wanting to provide, creditors, investors, the stakeholders, right? The citizens, the governing authority, with a high level of comfort on the accuracy of the financial statements. And so the independent auditor in the report, the auditing standards have recently changed, and I love that because the first thing I see is the opinion. I don't have to read 2 pages before I get to the opinion that's buried way over here, right? It's the first thing front and center now in the report. But basically, are these financial statements prepared in conformity with those generally accepted accounting principles as prescribed by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board? And so it's not absolute assurance for the reason that I mentioned, right? It's not a test of every transaction, but it's a high level of assurance, right? It's reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free of material misstatements. Other audit requirements to be mindful of. So you all are a calendar year. Your fiscal year is a calendar year, so January 1 to December 31st. And so the audit, state law says that the audit report must be due to the state auditor within 180 days of the end of your fiscal year. And then within 30 days of submitting that report, if there are findings that have to be addressed through a corrective action plan, then that needs to be sent within 30 days as well, right, to the Department of Audits and Accounts. So audit opinions, it's probably really truly a 6-month-long process. I mean, it gets very complicated. There can be constitutional officers, right? I always say the audits of county government are much more complex than a city, just because we have the constitutional officers of the sheriff, the tax commissioner, probate court judge, so on and so forth. And so there's a lot of work that has to be done to be able to produce those financial statements. But we do all that work to get this opinion, right? That is what you are paying them for, is an opinion. Can we rely on this information? And so the best opinion that you could receive on your financial statements would be an unmodified opinion. So it says that these financial statements fairly present the financial position of the government, the results of operations for the government, and then you have all these opinion units in your financial statements, right? And so, but they are fairly, prepared in conformance with those generally accepted accounting principles. And then we have these other opinions, like these modified opinions that are not so good. And so if they are modifying their opinion, you could have a qualified opinion, right? So it's not so good, right? The financial states lack conformity with GAAP, so maybe there's some departure from GAAP, from some accounting pronouncement. An adverse opinion is not that's bad, right? So sufficient appropriate evidence is obtained, but there's misstatements that are material or pervasive to the financial statements. And then the worst opinion would be a disclaimer of opinion, right? That's ugly. That just simply means that the auditor cannot obtain sufficient evidence. So that means the books are probably so messed up, we don't really know which way is up or down. So that is not a good position to be in. And I'm glad to see, I was looking at the 2023 report, it's online, and so you're in good shape from that perspective. And so I wanted to bring that in, right? So what does this auditor's report look like? And so I said, front and center, right? Here it is. And so the audit, you received an unmodified opinion on your financial statement audit. And so the financial statements do fairly present the results, financial position and results of operation for Augusta, right? And so the scope of this audit is important too. So it's not just the primary government, Augusta, Richmond County, but it's also the component units of the government. And so you do have those, they're mentioned in the notes to your financial statement. So the reporting entity is real important. It's the primary government, but it's also those other organizations that are legally separate, but for which the governing authority is financially accountable. And so the GASB says that we need to be able to provide full disclosure, right? So not just the primary government, but other relationships it has when that relationship really results in financial accountability. So like a health department as an example would be a component unit. So when performing the audit, so I like this too, so in the report, the independent auditor's report, they're going to set forth what they are doing, and they're also letting us know that they're performing this audit in accordance with the generally accepted auditing standards, right, that are prescribed by the Auditing Standards Board of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, but also the government auditing standards as defined by the Comptroller General. So here they're saying that they are, exercising professional judgment, maintaining professional skepticism, right? They're looking at internal control. They're assessing risk. They are evaluating the appropriateness of accounting policies used and the reasonableness of significant accounting estimates made by management. And so these are all the things that they're really doing, right? So they're gathering evidence to be able to make that opinion on the financial statements. The single audit is really over and above the financial statement audit. And so so you receive a number of different federal grants. And so if you expend more than $1 million in federal funds, then you will also undergo this single audit. So that uniform grant guidance is really important. So that Title II of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 200, sets forth the guidance. And this audit would be performed with an annual financial audit. So it includes both financial and compliance components. And so the objective of an audit like this is to provide assurance to the federal government and agencies that we have properly expended and manage these funds and use them for their intended purpose. Now, you can have many different federal awards, but there's a risk-based approach that is taken to that single audit. And so you could be a high-risk auditee or a low-risk auditee. If you were a low-risk auditee, then they're only going to look at 20% of those federal awards that were expended. But if you're a high-risk auditee, then they're looking at 40%. So what that means is they don't audit each and every one of those federal awards, and they have a way of determining which ones are high risk, right? There's some procedures that they go through to determine which programs they audit, but it's going to represent 40% of the coverage. And so then there is a schedule of expenditures of federal awards that has to be prepared. And then they opine on that in relation to the financial statements as a whole. So we have that CFA schedule. And so I thought, that's a lot to know, right? It's very highly technical, but you do have to undergo this, right? It's a federal requirement. And so here I thought maybe it's helpful to see what does the auditor's report look like. So in an audit conducted in accordance with those generally accepted government auditing standards, the Yellow Book standards, they're going to say, what is the opinion on the financial statements? Well, that's a clean opinion, right? That's the best that you could get. It's an unmodified opinion. They're looking at internal controls over financial reporting. Were there any material weaknesses that were identified? And there were none in 2023. Were there any significant deficiencies that were identified and not considered to be material weaknesses? No. And was there any non-compliance that was material to the financial statements noted? And the answer was no. And then when we look at those federal awards, there were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. And then when they looked at the major, so they're going to report on compliance with major programs. And so the opinion was unmodified. And there were no findings that were required to be reported in accordance with the Code of Federal Regulations. And then, so at the bottom it says, did the auditee qualify as a low-risk auditee? And the answer is no. And so that means there was 40% coverage, right, in terms of those federal awards that were expended. And so that's because there were findings in prior years. And then, were there any financial statement findings? No current financial statement findings. And any federal award findings and question costs, none of those either, right? So the single audit for 2023 looked really good. Now, your financial statements for 2024 are not yet posted online, so I couldn't, but those should be available hopefully soon, right? Because we're at that 180-day mark and beyond it, really. Another thing that you might consider as you're looking at your charter, right? So these other things are required, right? So they have to be in the charter, the requirements of state law and federal law. Other things that you might consider, other tools in the toolbox, might be an internal audit function, right? So I would say that while the governing authority here is ultimately responsible for internal control, because they have that fiduciary responsibility for the oversight, then management is primarily responsible for the internal control. And so I say that because it is management that is using internal control as tools and techniques to ensure that they meet their objectives in a number of different areas. So accurate, reliable, financial reporting would be one area. Do y'all agree with that? Another area that would be important would be compliance over the expenditures of federal awards and not overspending the budget, right? So I said there's a legal level of control, right? So the most fundamental form of accountability that a government has, since taxpayers are involuntary resource providers, I don't voluntarily pay my taxes, and I have no children in school, but I pay school tax, and I'm happy to do it because somebody did it for me once upon a time, right? But I'm an involuntary resource provider, but the most fundamental form of accountability we have would be the budget. So we adopt budgets, and then can we live within our budgetary authority? I mean, we're motivated to provide service in government. We're not trying to return a dividend to a shareholder. We're not trying to make a profit. We're trying to achieve budgetary equilibrium and live within a budget. Which is why maybe you could do that sometimes more efficiently, right? And use less resources, which is why you might explore the opportunity for a program audit as an example. But we need good controls in place, right? And so an internal audit function can help with that. The other thing is that management is busy with so many different things, right? So I feel like a lot of times we use as a surrogate for monitoring internal controls the financial statement audit that comes many months after the fiscal year has already concluded. And we can't really do that, right? We need to be more proactive and plant that seed of, hey, maybe it's good to have an internal audit function that can help us be more successful and ensure that our programs are effective, that we are operating as efficiently as we possibly can with taxpayer resources, and that we're looking at where our risks are, right? So risk is important. Like this morning, these ladies said, John, if you want to ride with me, you better be here in this parking lot at. So I started assessing risk yesterday, right? And so I need to mitigate that risk. So my control activity was I set a few alarms, right? So I get up on time this morning, I get the dogs fed, I do all of that, and then I'm able to meet them on time so I can ride with them here to Augusta. So in other words, like in this environment, each and every day I'm hearing about another data breach. I'm hearing about the fact that systems are being compromised, ransomware attacks. So I feel like if you have an internal audit function, then there are people then that are looking at where your risks are and then providing recommendations on how we can improve, right, and reduce and mitigate those risks. And I realize it's an expenditure in the budget because it is people that have to be hired, so it increases, but then there could be costs that are saved over time. And if we're not going to do that, at least we might need to contract some things. Like if I were still a practicing finance director, yeah, I may have an IT director, and they may say, hey, John, I feel like all of our information is secure. But I'm probably, I want to verify that, right? I may trust what they tell me, but I also want to verify that. And so I'm probably going to recommend and get on the agenda and come to the meeting and say, I think we need a vulnerability assessment done. An independent assessment that says, hey, look, we've looked, and yes, you're okay, right? Or maybe we're not okay. So an internal audit function, I think we need to look at it as a positive thing. It's not to be used as a tool for punishment. I think that what it does is it helps us show where our risks are and opportunities for managing that risk. So it's almost like, and then it gives taxpayers, it gives stakeholders an added level of comfort, right, that somebody is looking. They also become the eyes and ears, right, for the audit committee and for the governing authority. So something that you might just want to consider. And so I included a link, and I know you all get this presentation to the GFOA best practice, and they say regardless of a government size, regardless of whether you're large or small, that this is a best practice. And so it's something that you should consider. And even if you don't look at an internal audit function, there are benefits to an audit committee. And so the cost here these are appointees, just like you serving in a volunteer capacity, right, on a committee, but could help to provide oversight to management of the independent auditor. So like I said, maybe helping develop the RFP, selecting a qualified auditor to conduct your audit, also creating a forum where the governing body and the independent auditors can candidly discuss concerns apart from management, but then also a committee that can evaluate the performance of the independent auditor. So an audit committee could be very valuable even in the absence of an internal audit function. But I think at the end of the day, we have to realize that we're exposed to lots of risks. And so whether we address those risks like through an independent or through an audit committee, an internal audit function with employees of the government, we should, at a minimum, look at maybe contracting some of that out, right? So just other tools that you can put in place to help ensure that you're successful in all you do here in Augusta, right? And then the last thing really is your audit. It is a useful financial management tool. It's very valuable for providing feedback when communicating with constitutional officers, provides transparency for users, and instills confidence among citizens and stakeholders. It cannot eliminate, right? I mean, Lee and I could collude, right? Charlie and I could collude, right, to circumvent the controls. So it cannot eliminate or uncover all fraud. And in fact, only about 3% or less of the fraud that is detected through a financial statement audit. It cannot provide absolute assurance for the reasons I mentioned earlier, and it can't really be a surrogate for good internal control, right? So you don't want to just let your monitoring of internal control, you don't want to relegate that to the financial statement audit and say, oh, well, we didn't have any findings, so everything must be great. No, there's still risks that you're exposed to, right? And so you want to think of it in those terms. So thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Very good. Gentlewoman from District 2, please.
Good morning. Thank you so much. That was very informative. I have a couple of questions. So I think one of the things that we hear quite a bit from our community is they feel like there is a lack of accountability and trust regarding some of our budget issues, whether it's SPLOST or stormwater fees or grants that have recently had to be returned to the federal government. One, if you have an internal auditor, if you were to set this up, and I don't know if you feel comfortable answering that question because that puts you on the spot just a little bit, But it sounds like, so, and you touched on it a little bit at the end when you were like, if this person is friends with this person, then maybe this isn't touched on. So if we were to go with an internal auditor, would you also suggest having the audit committee? And then, because otherwise the internal auditor would still report to the city manager or city administrator, correct?
Well, I think you want to be careful. There's different schools of thought on that, but I think they do need independence in the work that they are doing. I think that it would be very wise to have an audit committee that could oversee, and in fact, they would meet routinely with the director of internal audit. Right, there would be a plan of work that is being performed and recommended and approved by the internal or by the audit committee. So I would think that they would want to report directly to them for the programmatic things that they are doing as it relates to internal auditing, and then ultimately have that line. And a lot of times if you'll look at an organizational chart, you'll see that there may be administratively attached for budgetary reasons and personnel reasons to the administrator or the manager, depending upon the form of government that you have, but then they have that direct line to the governing authority, right? So I think that's very important, and I think you would want to have that audit committee, because really the purpose of the audit committee is to provide oversight for the internal audit function, but also the external audit of the financial statements.
So, and just a follow-up question too, a lot of auditing to me sounds like it is not proactive. So for instance, let's say this audit that's going to come out is going to see the $6.5 million that, you know, was not, whatever happened to it, I don't know. But how can we catch it before that happens?
So you want to be proactive, and having an internal audit function is being proactive. I mean, discovering fraud after the fact, right? Then we're just like through a forensic audit, then we're being reactive, right? We're in a reactive posture. So I think that we would want to know, where did the breakdown in internal control occur that allowed that to happen? And there's different types of controls. There's detective controls, there's preventative controls. But I would want to know more about that. I have heard some of that, but I don't know all the details. And perhaps that may be why the current year's report is being held up, right? Because we're still not finished. But I would want to know, how did that happen? Because there's some weakness in internal control or lack of oversight and accountability that allowed that to happen.
Yeah.
And so I think a good way to be proactive, right? So if you don't have an internal audit function, then you don't really know about that until it's seen. And I'm not sure how this was discovered, right? I mean, most fraud is an anonymous tip, it's a whistleblower, but I don't know how it was detected. But regardless, if you can be more proactive by having an internal audit function that can help strengthen the control environment.
Yeah, I'm not sure that this has been technically labeled as fraud at this point, but my understanding is it was the letters that came in from the federal government saying return the money.
Yeah, so who knows, right? Why? I mean, maybe it was some question cost that became disallowed and the money has to be paid back. I don't know, so I don't know enough about that situation.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Committee members, you should know that in our current charter, there was provision for an internal auditor. And about, I cannot give you an accurate year, but there was a point mid last decade where that function was not appropriated and it just fizzled out. So it's roughly 10 years. Ms. Robinson.
I have two questions. One of them will kind of continue a little bit of what Ms. Backus just talked about, but I'm going to give direct examples because I want to better understand. So in a recent commission meeting, there was discussion of a gentleman who has been handling beautification for Wheeler Road for a very long time. During the hurricane, we lost a bunch of trees, and it was stipulated that he would replace the trees if the city paid for half. The question that came up in that particular meeting was, did this go through purchasing? Because he was paid. So my question is, in this instance, I think it's an issue of ethics. Was this ethically done based on the rules and regulations and policies we have within the, between the charter and potentially ordinances versus morally done? I think the man should have been paid, but at the same time, were procedures followed? So in instances of that, where you're looking at an ethical versus a moral dilemma in a situation, how can the government, and maybe this is handled in ordinance, I'm not sure, how could we create policy that would safeguard the government from any potential malfeasance, even though it wasn't intentional? It just, the procedure wasn't followed while still fulfilling those moral obligations.
And I don't know all the details of that situation, so I really prefer not to comment on that. But what I
Okay.
would do is, that's why you have a finance director. So I would use that as an opportunity to meet with the finance director to understand more about the transaction, how that happened, and what their recommendation would be on that.
Okay, understandable. With the issue with the 6-point-something, I think $6.5 million that was returned to the federal government, is it your professional opinion potentially that a performance audit from an internal auditor could have caught that before it became an issue?
See, I don't know enough about the details of what has occurred. I've looked to see if your financial statements have been posted. They have not been, and I don't even know when that really occurred, what the date of that is. Did that happen in your fiscal 24?
It happened in this fiscal year.
So is it 20, so it's your current 2025 fiscal year? So I don't have enough information to really talk about that. But performance audits are really looking at efficiency and effectiveness of programs. I think that's going to be more detected through some kind of a different type of audit, if it is even detected at all. But I would still want to know where the breakdown in internal control really occurred, right? And how did it get detected?
Essentially, to my knowledge, and this is pretty much what was put to the public, the money wasn't necessarily spent on something else for the most part. It wasn't used at all. So it just kind of sat there until the government was like, well, you know.
Madam
So
Chair.
maybe, so this maybe could be like a.
Let's return to topic of audits.
Oh, no, yeah.
And I think let's bring this in, and I understand that, but bring it up in finance because we're trying to wrap it up.
Well, I was just asking a question about pretty much the instances of when performance audits could be effective, so.
I think those are more effective when you're looking at our programs operating as they were designed to operate. So you're looking at the effectiveness of a program, the efficiencies in a program. Like maybe we're looking at like the 5% surcharge on criminal fines that are for victims. And so looking at the parameters about how funds are being used, right? And are there opportunities for improving effectiveness or efficiency within a particular program? So I have some other thoughts about that, but we could talk about that offline. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
no, absolutely.
Gentleman from District 4, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair. Great presentation. Just have a couple of questions I want to ask. When we're talking about the internal audit versus external audit, are there different control sets that we are evaluating based on what type of audit we are doing, whether it be a financial audit, a financial statement, or different control sets that we're looking at when we do that?
Well, I think so. You're still looking at the same comprehensive framework of internal control, right? So you're looking at the control environment, you're looking at risk assessment, you're looking at control-related activities, information and communication and monitoring. Now, there's different standards that they may subscribe to when they're performing those. Just like in a performance audit, they would get their standards from the Yellow Book. But it's still that same comprehensive framework of internal control. It's just that with internal auditing, it may be more targeted and specific, whereas a financial statement is much broader and it's looking at the reporting entity as a whole. But in an internal audit, you may be looking at a targeted area, as I had said before, but still it's the same comprehensive framework of internal control.
So would it be safe to say, sir, that then by setting up a internal audit committee or someone to perform those functions, they have to be qualified to be a CPA? Is that correct?
They're not all. Like you would, so there are some people that are certified internal auditors. That is a professional credential. but not all of them are licensed certified public accountants.
Okay, so when the process is underway, started, if you run into a control where, if there are certain controls where the audit will actually stop in the process, if it doesn't pass that control?
Well, first of all, they're not going to be performing and opining on your externally issued audited financial statements, right? So you're going to engage an independent certified public accountant for that purpose to render an opinion on your financial statements. An internal audit function is going to be looking at different departments, maybe looking at different areas within the government, programs, whatever it happens to be. But that is what they are doing. And they would do that work under the guidance of the audit committee. But they are looking to, and so it's a proactive way of strengthening the internal controls that exist within the government, right? So it's still the same framework of internal control. You're engaging an independent certified public accountant. They have to be independent in fact and appearance, and they're rendering an opinion on your financial statements, right? An internal auditor is working internally for the government, and so they are looking at areas and preparing a program of work that really is blessed, I would say, by an audit committee, and looking at high-risk areas within the government. And so if they encounter any deficiencies in internal controls or instances of noncompliance, they're going to report those in their report to the audit committee, and that ultimately is shared with management.
So as you speak on that report, so what about continuous monitoring after the fact? What is the requirement for continuous monitoring, if any?
Oh, I think we always should be doing continuous monitoring. So, I mean, systems change, dynamics change, new risks can be introduced. And so we should always be doing monitoring, right? So to me, like the budget is a great example. It is a control document. The governing authority adopts a budget, and then we have to live within the budget, right? Unless the budget becomes amended. So departments should be receiving internal reports that show their actual expenditures compared to their budget, and so that becomes a tool for monitoring. The governing authority on a quarterly basis should be receiving interim financial reports, and they should be looking at, are we in compliance and not overspending the budget, right? So that's a part of monitoring. So I think it's a repetitious, it's a dynamic, it's a very iterative process. It's not a one and done thing, right? And so it's going to be a risk-based approach, and that's why you would see value in an audit committee. What are our highest risk areas? Like if we were, implementing a new financial accounting software system, right, or a payroll system, then obviously there's going to be a lot of risk in that process, and so we would probably want to look at that, right? So I think it's a risk-based approach because there's lots of things that they could look at in the government, but it's still the same framework of internal control. But if they do find these inconsistencies, then those are going to be reported, and they're going to be reporting to the audit committee and to management, and so they're going to share that information, and then that's going to become opportunities of, we look at, well, where did these breakdowns occur, and how do we correct those deficiencies?
So last question. So based on policy then, internal and external audits should be conducted semi-annually, annually?
Oh, Georgia law requires, y'all are at that threshold that you require an annual audit of your financial statements, and it is due within 6 months of the Georgia Department of Audits and Accounts, so it's due within 180 days of the end of your fiscal year, so it was really due on June 30. So that is very different. That external audit, the scope of that is the reporting entity, right? Like I said, internal auditing can be very targeted.
Okay, thank you.
The different departments, programs, activities, functions. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Pearson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to ask the attorney a question. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Just, should we be careful as a committee making statements regarding active situations, cases? As a committee, should we be careful? Because I'm just getting the feeling that we're going down a path that we should not go down. And because anything we say could be utilized in a different setting. So that's my concern.
Well, I will say this, that please keep your comments germane to the issue. So I do know that I've been listening, and so, yes, just take that into consideration, just to keep it germane to the topic, okay?
Okay. All right.
And with that in mind, you'll rein it in, so.
Just wanted to ask, sir, how often are external audits done in general, in most cases?
Annually.
External.
External audit of your financial statements, yes. So
Wow,
you're
annually. External.
annually,
Wow.
yes. Yes, unless you meet the requirement for agreed upon procedures or a biennial audit. And so all counties in Georgia really meet the requirement for an annual audit of those financial statements. So it's back looking at this criteria. I can just go back right here for you. So the Official Code of Georgia, state law. So this is the criteria that you see here. So if your population is greater than 1,500 or your expenditures are greater than or equal to $550,000, you undergo an annual audit of your financial statements. And so that's where it's important to ensure that you're engaging a qualified auditor, right, to audit your financial statements. They audit these financial statements, and then you return them to the Georgia Department of Audits and Accounts, to the Local Government Services Division.
Okay, I guess I was thinking when you were saying annual audits, I was thinking internal, not external.
No, there's two. Don't confuse the two,
Right.
right? So you have an external auditor that's independent in fact and appearance that is looking at the financial statements to
Right.
see, and those are management's assertions, right? The financial statements are the responsibility of management. The auditor is just to opine on those statements. So can we rely on them, right? And so that's why that opinion is so important. And so that is conducted on an annual basis. And so if you'll go out to the government's homepage here in Augusta, and if you will go to the departments and go to the Department of Finance, so there's in the ribbon at the top, there's a place to go for departments. And if you'll just scroll down to finance and click that, then you'll see all the audit reports that have been produced. And so they go back to 2023. I could find up to 2023. The 2024 report's just not yet available, right? But will be hopefully soon. And I just want to say too, like if you have if they're with these ARPA funds, and I don't know the situation with that, and I would never, hazard to get, I would always want all the facts, right? And look at the circumstances to know more about that. I've heard about that, but then I'm like, I would like to see a set of financial statements. I would like to know more about it. But two, if you haven't expended the funds for their intended purpose, and then there's a period of time that you have to, and that expires, then that could also trigger that funds have to be returned as well. So we don't really know the situation. I don't know. I haven't seen anything to know all the details to be able to talk and make an informed or have an informed opinion about what this $6 million is that I keep hearing about, right? And that would be my role anyway, so.
Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Halsey, I have studied other consolidated governments in the state of Georgia about the audit process. And I have put together a document to create or reestablish the audit process, internal audit process in the Augusta government. A lot of what you detailed is in that document. One of the things that I did not recognize in going through all of that information was the importance of the audit committee and their oversight of the internal auditor. I think that is what you have presented here today will probably fill up my next week going back over it in detail, because the audit process, internal audit process is one of the, in my opinion, is one of the ways that we can reestablish trust between the voters and the local government, because they will know that the tax money that they are spending is being used what is supposed to be used for. And then you'll have documentation that that information is available to the general public. But I have to thank you for this presentation. It has just overwhelmed me with more information to dig into, and as the chair of the Finance Subcommittee, I'm sure there's going to be quite some interesting conversations over this. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir.
And thank you, Mr. Powell and Mr. Wimberly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are we to go away from here thinking that our external audit has not been done? Because you said you looked for it and you didn't see it. Did you look for where the audit is filed, or did you look on our website?
I just looked on your website, and then I went out to the Department of Audits and Accounts website to see if it was there. And so maybe there's an extension. I don't really know. It doesn't let me know. It just the fact that it's not been filed yet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wimberly. Mr. Powell, we're going to try to move this along because we've got subcommittees in an hour and a half.
Very quickly, it has been my understanding that the internal audit function has not been working in the government in the last 2 or 3 years.
Mr. Coleman.
Just one quick question. An internal audit function along with a committee, would that also have oversight over any like special taxation like SPLOST funds?
Yeah, if you wanted them to look and take a deep dive into the SPLOST expenditures, then they could, yes. So you would do that through the audit committee, yeah, and through the internal audit function. Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Halsey.
Absolutely.
Ms. Brill.
First, I just wanted to thank John. I learned a lot, and he's very knowledgeable about these topics. I wanted to let you know that if you have any questions that aren't answered today, if you think about them over the next week or so, you can send them to Ms. Wilhelmy, and she will send them to either Rex or myself, and we will get them to John and get you an answer. So I didn't want you to think if you didn't ask it today, you won't be able to, because you're more than welcome to send it to us.
Thank you very much. Along those lines, if the committee members have anything for the attorney, I have been asked to try to funnel everything through one source so it can be distributed to everybody. That applies to Carl Vinson, Mr. Plunkett's office, Ms. Bonner, everybody. Just I'm passing this along. Similarly, it became apparent in the last couple of weeks that we've had issues with how does the public interface with this committee. I have skipped over number 4 after telling our next speaker last evening that we were going to try to put her in there, but we'll fix that very shortly. Going forward, later today, we are going to be meeting with the folks over in IT to bring a bunch of new documentation to the website. And on that website, it'll make it very simple for anybody wanting to find future agendas and then fill out the form, which has to be completed by Fridays at noon to Ms. Bonner to make it on to the Charter Review Committee's run-up and agenda. So real important change. Share it widely. We're going to put it on the front page, how you get directed to Charter Review, and then it'll be pretty apparent from there. So that being the case, if she would be so kind to do so, can I call the representative for the League of Women Voters, Ms. Gayla Kesey, to the podium. And please accept my apologies for my brain lapse.
No problem. I totally understand how things happen. Yes, good morning. I think it's morning still. Yep, for just a little while. My name is Gayla Kesey. I am co-president of the League of Women Voters of the CSRA, and I would like to thank the committee for taking recent steps to improve that transparency and access. especially around meeting agendas and public participation. These efforts are appreciated and they do matter. It's encouraging to see that feedback from residents is being heard and acted upon, and I hope this continues. That being said, I still have a serious concern about the appearance of political influence in this process, particularly regarding a scheduled public event next week. On August 14th, the West Augusta Alliance is hosting a community meeting titled Charter Review Committee Officials and Leaders Give Their Opinions. The featured speakers include Committee Chair Marcy Wilhelmi and Mayor Garnett Johnson, who is scheduled to lead the Pledge of Allegiance. The event creates an unmistakable appearance of a conflict of interest. The Charter Review Committee is tasked with evaluating the powers and structure of local government, including the office of the mayor. While the chair of the committee appears alongside the sitting mayor, it raises real questions about impartiality. Even if nothing appropriate is said, the optics are damaging. The public could reasonably perceive that the committee and the mayor are aligned, coordinated, or politically connected, when in fact, this process is supposed to be fully independent. It's worth emphasizing that the resolution adopted by the Augusta-Richmond County Commission specifically defines this committee as an independent entity. That language isn't decorative, and it sets expectations. When a body is called independent, it must not only operate free from political influence, it must also avoid the appearance of influence. Joint public appearances between committee leadership and elected officials whose powers are under review directly undermine that standard. By contrast, I want to commend committee member Lonnie Wimberly, who stated at the Concerned Pastors of District 10 Town Hall that he has had no contact with his appointing commissioner other than brief greetings at public events. That kind of clear boundary is exactly what helps protect the integrity of this process and restore public trust. This charter review process is one of the most important public efforts we've undertaken in years. The stakes are high. We're talking about the structure of our local government, the balance of power, and how accountable our systems will be going forward. The public needs to believe this work is being done independently and fairly, without any elected official, including the mayor, appearing to influence the outcome. That's why I respectfully urge the committee, 1, refrain from participating in public events that include elected officials whose powers are under review. 2, adopt and publish guidelines around public appearances and engagement to avoid future conflicts or confusion. And continue the positive trend of improving transparency, public notice, and meeting documentation, which builds credibility and invites broader public participation. We all want a government that works and a process that works towards that goal. Thank you again for the improvements already underway, and I hope the committee will also take this next step to protect the integrity of the process as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kesey. Just for your edification, I have just now learned that Mayor Johnson's been asked to attend that meeting. We don't prepare that agenda. So thank you for letting me know, but I probably would arrive next Thursday night without knowing that. Thank you. All right, we have the happy task next of selecting our next vice chairman. Let us declare it open for nominations. Mr. Pearson.
Yes, I would like to nominate Mr. Clint Bryant as our next VP.
Okay, thank you.
Second. Second.
All right. Madam, do we take other nominations in, or how do we do this? How do you?
You take those in and you vote on them in the
Perfect.
accordance in which they've been nominated.
All right, very good. All right, Ms. Backus.
I'd like to nominate Chevy Robinson.
Okay, is there a second? Don't need a second. Okay, very good. All right. Any others? All right, forgive me for looking so hard. I'm having cataract surgery on Monday, and it's really killing me. If we can go ahead then and pull together, the first candidate is Mr. Bryant. If you will go ahead and cast your votes. Yes.
I vote yes.
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 That motion carries with Ms. Robinson, Ms. Bakos voting no.
All right.
Mr. Wembley, I'm sorry. That's Ms. Robinson, Ms. Bakos, and Mr. Wembley voting no.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Congratulations, Coach. We think. Very much so. All right, we have Clerk, Ms. Backus.
If I could just follow up on something Ms. Kesey had said, just to clarify, the issue that you had was that both the chair and the mayor were on the agenda, or that they were going to be at the same event? Because, for instance, I attended the neighborhood association meeting on Saturday, and of course there were a lot of different elected officials, including the mayor, and I spoke to him about a department issue. So I just want to make sure when you're speaking of conflicts, if we could have clear barriers.
The title of this meeting is Charter Review Committee Officials and Leaders Give Their Opinions. That indicates that it's not like a regular meeting like what the Richmond County Neighborhood Association. This was specifically speaking on charter issues.
Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to clarify, because at first, and then I caught on, so I didn't know if everybody else did, so I just wanted to make sure that when other people do see us out at events, that is not a conflict. Thank you.
Exactly.
All right, thank you. Is there any other business to come before this body today? Ms. Robinson.
To my knowledge, when following correct parliamentary procedure, when there are two candidates, you're supposed to still vote on both. Is that correct?
Okay, very good. Well, we can do that to correct the record.
Thank you.
All right. So we will vote on our second candidate, which was Ms. Robinson. We'll go ahead and, gosh, I mean, you just vote again. Is that the way we did it for chairman? I don't recall. Okay, so please cast your votes then. No.
Mr. Pearson,
No.
Mr. Bryant.
No.
That motion fails with Ms. Robinson voting yes, Ms. Bakos voting yes, Mr. Wembley voting yes. Voting no, Ms. Wilhelmie, Mr. France abstaining, Mr. Bryant no, Mr. Lewis out, and Mr. Pearson no.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. If there is no further business to come before this body,
Madam Chairman.
I'm sorry, say that again, I'm sorry.
Madam Chairman, Moses Todd, I think I was on the agenda to speak, so.
You weren't.
Is the emails working? I sent an email into the clerk and to you.
I didn't get it either, so, please, Ms. Bonner.
Yes, ma'am. I think in light of the issue we had with our previous public commenter, I think it would be appropriate to allow Mr. Todd, if it's the will of the committee, to allow him to speak. Mm-hmm.
All right. Any objections to Mr. Todd speaking? Please, Mr. Todd. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and committee members. The subject that I want to speak on is something that I learned after arriving. So I will not make my comments per what I requested. I think I just requested to make comments, but I had other comments in mind at that time, and I'll make it brief. It's my understanding through emails, the committee has discussed not having comments at subcommittee meetings. And I would like for the committee to consider the fact that the subcommittee meetings is not workshops. They're subcommittee meetings. And whether you bring a action forward or not, a vote on the action to bring forward or not, if you have discussion, and if we're doing emails, then it could possibly be a action meeting. And I would strongly recommend that maybe you do workshops and that you don't do subcommittee meetings every week or every other week, that maybe you do a workshop 1 week so you can actually have discussion without public input. And when you have a subcommittee meeting, that you allow for public input. And that's just a recommendation. The other point that I would like to make, I know the presenter mentioned in his presentation on the audit, what could trigger an audit, so I would like to see a whistleblower program considered with rewards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Todd. Excellent suggestions. If there are any other issues to come before this body, otherwise we stand adjourned until August 21st for the total CRC. Thank you very much.
Smooth, efficient meeting. Smooth, efficient.